Yeah, of course. So she came up, and her name was Inga. She was dressed in all white. She was beautiful. And she came up, and I says, okay, it's all yours. Here's the stage. And she sat down. She says, okay, first of all, are there anybody in here that's skeptical, that doesn't believe that I can see without my eyes? And everybody sat there. And finally, two young men stood up and said, oh, come on, you can't see without your eyes. And she goes, well, would you two come up here then? And she sat them down and says, here's what I'm going to do. And she took tissue paper and put it in their eyes, and then had this long gold scarf and wrapped the scarf around and around and around their eyes with a tissue paper so nothing would go out, until she said, now, can you see? And the guy goes, no, I can't see a thing. Okay. And she did it to the other guy. He says, can you see? And he goes, no, I can't see a thing. She says, okay, do it to me. So they put the tissue paper into the eyes and wrapped this thing around and make sure it's not there. She says, are you satisfied that I can't see? She goes, they go, yeah, I don't think you can see. And he says, okay. So they went back and sat down. And she says, and I didn't know what she was going to do. I had no idea. And she says, would somebody give me a photograph? And so a woman just reached in her purse and pulled out a photograph and handed it to her. It was handed to her upside down. She immediately turned it right side up, and her finger went like this. And so then she describes the photograph as though she's just looking at it perfectly. It was a couch sitting in a living room with four people on the couch, with just a photograph. I mean, a painting behind the couch, and it was not just an ordinary photograph. And so she describes it in detail: the color, the people. There were 3 females and a male, like that. And she says, and I thought that was it. I thought that was it. And I started to reach for the photograph, and she said, is there anything you'd like to know about this photograph? And the lady says, well, what do you mean? She says, I can tell you anything. I can tell you who took the photograph, what their name is and their phone number is, and what they were thinking at the time, if you want. I can walk through your house. I can tell you where your house is. I can give you your name and address and phone number. I can tell you all the names of the people on the couch, or anything you want. What do you want? She goes, you can? She goes, okay. Go to the right of the picture and tell me what's there. And there was nothing there. You couldn't see anything. And she goes, well, you got a hallway right there, and the first door on the left is your bedroom. She went in and described her bedroom in detail. The colors, where the bed was. Even went over to her nightstand and told her what was sitting on the nightstand. Then she went out across the door into the next one, which was into her bathroom, and described the bathroom exactly. The colors, the size, the shape, and what it was, and everything. And the woman says, that's enough. She says, that's absolutely correct. And so she handed her back, and she says, does anybody else has a photograph? Well, one of these guys jumps up and says, come on, you rigged this before. You know this lady. She gave you the thing. He says, let me give you something of mine. She goes, okay. So he reaches in his wallet and gives her his driver's license. But he turns it upside down and backwards when he hands it to her. She immediately turns it right side up and frontwards. And her little finger goes like this. She goes, it's your driver's license. And she reads off the numbers and addresses and all the stuff on there like that. And he goes, I don't know how you're doing it, but you're faking this somehow. He says, you are not convincing me. Tell me something that only I know. That only I know. No one else knows. And this little smile comes on her face. She goes, okay. And he was there with her girlfriend. She was sitting next to her, but he was standing up here now. And he goes, you have 2 girlfriends. and their names are da-da-da-da-da-da, which was one of them that was here. And they don't know about each other. And he starts to go on further. And she's up straight in her chair. And he grabs the license plate out of her, or the thing out of her, and she goes, that's enough. And walks down and sits down, and she's... and we didn't hear from him ever again. And then other photographs were handed to her by lots of people. Lots and lots of people. And she could go into those photographs and just tell you everything. In fact, there isn't anything that she couldn't tell you. Anything you could think of. She could give you the birth date. She could tell you where you were born. She could even tell you the day you're going to die, down to the minute and where and how. She could tell you anything in the future. Tell you anything. As outrageous as it seems, that audience was pretty shocked, I'm sure. Well, later, I brought her to my house. We've become very good friends, and along with her mother, Ima. And I, for 3 days, I performed all kinds of experiments. And some experiments that were, you just couldn't fake, not in a million years. I had a whole bunch of bottles of water that we were analyzing. And they were just lettered A, B, C, D, like that. And they all looked the same, except in them were different chemical makeups. Well, she was able to hold the bottle just for a second and tell me exactly what was in the water. Some of those bottles of water, I knew what it was, so she could have been getting it from my mind. But there were about half of them I had no idea, and some guy in some lab somewhere in the world knew where it was. But she still nailed every single one of them right. And I kept going on all kinds of things, and it didn't matter what I did. She was 100% perfect on everything. And this was fascinating. Then finally, after a couple of days, I was sitting here, and we were doing a break. She was just hanging out on the couch, and I was hanging out on the couch. And we were breaking, we're just talking. And I said, Inga, I was curious. I said, what do you see when you close your eyes and you're blindfolded? What do you see inside? What happened? What's going on in there? And she said, oh, it's not important. And I said, well, yeah, it is. I'm curious. Just try to tell me what's going on inside there, in your head. And she didn't want to tell me, and I had to keep pushing it. And finally, like about 10 minutes of pushing her, she says, well, it's weird. That's why I don't want to tell you. It looks like a little computer screen inside there with these little tiny computer screens around the outside. I almost fell off the couch. It was the last thing in the world I thought she was going to tell me. I mean, here it was, exactly the same as Marianne Shenfield. I said, I know what that is. She goes, I know you know what that is. She says, the reason I came to your workshop was because I saw your poster, and when I saw the poster, I knew you were connected to this, and that's why I wanted to connect with you. And I says, oh, okay. And so when she left, after she left, then I'm thinking, well, do all the kids in China also see the center screen? So there was a book written about these kids in China called China's Super Psychics. And it was written by a man named Paul Dong. So I found out where he was, and he was in California. He was 72 years old, and I called him up. Really nice guy. We talked for about 2 hours, and it was really, I got lots of good information. But somewhere in that conversation, I said to him, Paul, you've been studying these kids for 15 years or so. What do they see inside their head? And he went through the same thing. He didn't want to tell me. And finally he says, well, I don't really know. I've never experienced it, but a lot of these kids tell us they see some kind of computer screen or television screen inside their head. And I said, they have these little windows around the outside. And he goes, I don't know anything about that. All they say is it's some kind of screen that they see inside their head. And I'm going, and so now all of my little wheels in my head are going, wow, I know what this is. And it's all tied to darkness. They go in and they seal their eyes off, just like Marianne Shenfield, who was blind. They don't want any light. Not any. They don't want one photon getting in there if they can. They want it completely dark. And this is a huge key in the new consciousness that's unfolding.